This is a vision of how ABM could play as our primary go-to-market strategy.
It unites a number of those different functions, right? From customer success to delivery to marketing to sales.
It's showing the organization the art of the possible.
What are the non-negotiables on this, Robert? What do you see are the real key pillars in this operating system?
Yeah, it's a big question.
That is, isn't it? Hi, and welcome to the Soapbox at Ice Blue Sky, the podcast where we share practical insights from industry experts on pressing issues around achieving B2B growth. And with me today, I have Robert Norum, who is the ABM thought leader, propolis expert and consultant of B2B marketing. Robert, thank you for coming back today.
Pleasure, Graham. Great to be back for round two.
Absolutely, your second time. You know,
yeah, I'm honoured.
It's your fans. It's your fans out there that have asked us to bring you back.
You, Charlotte, and Francesca, yeah.
Something like that. And I've also got Francesca Berto, who's one of the directors here at Ice Blue Sky as well. But you guys are going to do a far better job at introducing yourself quickly. Robert, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and what we're going to talk about today?
Okay. Well, I've been working in B2B marketing for 30 plus years. I normally cap it at that just to sort of stop myself sounding too ancient. I've focused on account-based marketing for the last 13 years, working as a consultant, embedded with agencies and obviously advising clients directly. And as you alluded to, I work very closely with B2B marketing and their community propolis, where I advise their clients and do all kinds of things, power hours, ask the expert, best practice briefings, etc. So as I sometimes say, if you cut me in half, you're probably going to find the letters ABM in the rock.
Well, what I always find is if I'm ever on LinkedIn and I'm trying to connect to somebody, usually you're a connection of theirs already. So you're so well networked within that area. So you must know a whole host of different people.
Yeah, when you've been around as long as I have, Graham, you have a lot of connections.
I think let's just stick with your well networked.
Yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely. And Francesca?
Yeah, so obviously I'm Francesca. So I've been working in the technology sector since my teens, actually. So maybe
Cool,
that's an
blimey.
easier way to say it than say how many years.
Yeah.
I've been really working with technology vendors, global technology vendors, and their channels. So that could be GSIs, that could be partners, professional services organisations, etc., really to enable them to grow market share across things like sales enablement, ABM, which we're talking about today. And I'm really excited to have Robert here because something we've talked about in the past is how do you go to market with a partner ABM strategy. So I'm looking forward to sort of exploring that a little bit today.
We got lots of things to talk about. And yes, I didn't really introduce myself, but not that I need any introduction. I'm Graham. I'm one of the directors here at Ice Blue Sky. And I'm hosting today's session, so I really want to get going and kicking off. Robert, back in November, we came to the ABM conference, and Ice Blue Sky were there, and you were the kickoff keynote speech. And you were there to talk about a view and I'm not going to say a product, but a strategy around the ABM operating system.
Yes.
The responses you got were great because I saw the interactivity and I thought, well, you know what, I'd love to talk to you more about that today and give a viewpoint to our audience, but also as well to your point, Francesca, is not just looking at it just in the sort of marketing ABM B2B side, but also to bring in a channel perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it doesn't just stop on the left side. It holistically, if it's looked at correctly, can add a great deal of value. So my first question to you is, what was the inspiration around the operating system and what you presented? And can you give us just a bit of a top-level view of it and what it's actually all about?
Yeah, so the inspiration was that B2B marketing and propolis have been talking about the commercial marketeer for about the last 12 months. And what we mean by the commercial marketeer is how does marketing really demonstrate value to the business? Moving away from all those old cliches of marketing of the colouring in brigade, they're the people that run events, they're the people that get leads, and showing real strategic know-how, if you like, and real demonstrable results in terms of growth. So the backdrop was the commercial marketeer. And what I wanted to do was to really position ABM as a core, if not the core, go-to-market strategy for anybody in enterprise or mid-market. So the concept of the operating system, if you like, or operating model, was that basically ABM is a primary go-to-market. and then unpacking that, if you want me to dive straight into that.
Yeah, what's the sort of end-to-end process? How far? Where does it begin? Where is its origins in relation to this? And then how far do you take it?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, clearly what I was trying to set out was a vision. So whether that vision is something people apply on day one or they grow into, is probably up for debate. But if you take the analogy of ABM being a strategic operating system, then there were a number of applications that sit on that. So the first one is actually picking up on the acronyms that have been floating around in the industry for quite a long time. ABE, account-based engagement. Mm-hmm. So that's engaging new customers. So ABM can obviously play a role in new client acquisition. And the second one is ABX, account-based experience. And the whole rationale for that, of course, is if they're existing customers, how do you optimize their experience? How do you think about extending the life of that customer, upsell, cross-sell, moving them into long-term plays where they become advocates for your organization? So those are the kind of first two applications. Mm-hmm. And I'll rattle off the other four relatively quickly, and then you can grill me on them. But the first one is account-based branding, and that's actually a relatively new concept. And it really came from the fact that if you look at Sixth Sense research and quite a few other players, they're basically saying most customers are 70% of the way through their journey before they engage with the vendor community. By that time, they've typically shortlisted 3 to 5 vendors. And actually, incredibly, 81% of the time, their first choice vendor on day one goes on to win the business. So in other words, if you're not one of those 3 to 5 vendors, you've missed the boat completely, and you really want to be in pole position. So that's about how do you get in early and shape the RFP, shape the deal. Buyer group marketing, which I know is a flavor or a subject that's close to your heart, is also an intrinsic application of ABM, because how can you target an account if you don't understand the buying group? Deal-based marketing, which is about strategic RFPs and bids, and really using one-to-one ABM to give you the best possible chance of winning. And then probably music to Francesca's ears, the final piece is partner-based ABM. And that's really how do you work with your partner ecosystem, which could be strategic ISVs or strategic partners, but it could certainly be distribution. It could even be resellers in the channel.
Yeah, really interesting. And I know underneath every one of those titles, there's a lot more.
There's a lot more. I'm trying to give you the short version.
You did very well. Francesca, your experience within channel and talking to vendors, talking to channel partners and that whole ecosystem there, how important is it, do you believe, to have a sort of a fuller ecosystem? And where does some of the things that Robert's talking about there, where do they sit within that chain of the people that you talk to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think what I like about your operating model as well, even if we just lift out the channel, is how it unites a number of those different functions, right? Yeah. So from customer success to delivery to marketing to sales, and actually gives an operating system as a go-to-market and aligning what we talk about a lot of sales and marketing, customer success and those types of things. So I think if you can extrapolate out into the partner ABM from that perspective, it then helps you sort of look at, okay, well, what are our joint value proposition when we go to market? So as vendor plus partner, whatever partner guise that is under, I think that's where I'd start to extrapolate out is that joint value proposition. Mm-hmm. And then how do they then execute on that in the target markets that make a difference for that partnership, as it were. So that's what I think is really interesting about your model. Yeah. And then how you can sort of build that out, if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I think that the crossover I see definitely within channel, and it's that white space of opportunity within existing customers. But because a lot of the vendors that you talk about, a lot of them are dealing with obviously their target accounts, and they want to expand that wallet. So definitely bringing the disciplines of the operating system into that. And I don't know, Francesca, you work more in that area than I do. Do you see that as a growing drive? But it's got to be underpinned by all the principles of what Robert's talking about in that complete operating system to drive success.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think if I go to an example, which I think is really interesting at the moment, so a vendor I'm working with, they actually want to grow specifically their GSI business or route to market, whether that's a PwC or an Accenture or whoever it might be. But actually that then talks to the brand kind of element from you. So if they are, this particular vendor is looking to go and target white space or new accounts, etc., together with that GSI. But what they're also doing is elevating their own brand within the GSI as well as targeting the customers. And so so that's, I think, a really clever way to think about ABM as well as that operating system in terms of how it can do two purposes, right, in that respect, because they want to be first to mind to the GSI in terms of when should I be engaging, who and should I be engaging, and it kind of ticks a couple of boxes there.
Yeah, I buy that completely. And something I didn't actually have on my slides for the deck of the operating system is a slide I've had for quite a long time on partner-based ABM. And if you imagine the classic ABM pyramid, at the top of it, you've got, let's call it the global GSIs, and that's two. So that's where you're actually doing ABM to the GSI to position yourself as the vendor of choice in that space. The second tier is with, which is where you're obviously creating your joint value proposition and go to market, obviously highly valuable. But then the third tier is actually through.
Yes.
And that's potentially where you would think about a reseller model where you might have multiple resellers that you want to coach on the ABM process. So the two with and through in the context of partner-based ABM, I think are all valid options and all worth considering.
I certainly think the discipline and the rigor of training that out to all those partners to make sure they're operating in a consistent way to support the strategy of the vendor. Is that a challenge? Training that out, getting that consistency, making sure if you're a vendor that all your partners that you want to deploy against, if you're giving them funding or if it's a total strategy, because it's great, but the consistency and making sure everybody's performing how they should be and what should be doing what they're doing, because it's not exactly being managed by an agency, it could be being run by their own internal marketing discipline.
And it's not going to be for everyone, right? It's not going to go through into every type of partner because there's such a vast different size, maturity, want, skill, all of those types of things. So I think ABM is still going to be suitable for a smaller subsegment of if you're looking at a resale partner, because they just wouldn't necessarily have the investment that they can make in that level. But I think even when we look at the maturity of side of it, I think there's an education thing, absolutely.
So one of the things I love about this, and I talk about this, is it's almost like you've got a utopian vision. What you've created is this end-to-end utopian vision. And in a smaller way, we've done a little bit around that about the segment of just buyer group marketing.
Sure.
So a utopian vision in that subset. Yeah. And obviously what you've shared in the operating system is very wide. What are the non-negotiables on this, Robert? What do you see are the real key pillars in this operating system, the absolute musts that people should look to adhere to get what I call that foundation right?
Yeah.
Because they may not be able to do everything all at once. And obviously once they've got that foundation right, how do they build on that?
Yeah, it's a big question.
That is, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, if I talk about the foundations for ABM, simplistically, I think the first thing is defining what it means for your organization. The second thing is really making sure that you're talking at an exec level to make sure your C-suite or your leadership team understand exactly what you mean and how it's going to deliver on the business. And the third thing is then engaging both sales and the wider organization, biz dev, SDRs, BDRs, customer success, maybe even channel partners, on their role in proceedings. So I think there are some fundamentals that you have to have in place. If you then think of the operating system, which I appreciate, without people seeing the slides and so forth, might sound ambitious, it's showing the organization the art of the possible. This is a vision of how ABM could play as our primary go-to-market strategy. Then I think if you say, well, what are the non-negotiables? The non-negotiables are you have to understand the business. Where do we make our money? Which accounts are most profitable? What's our target account list for naming new customers? Where's the white space for existing customers? What's the balance of power, if you like, between new name client acquisition and existing customer growth? And you really need to interrogate the business in a smart, intelligent way. So that marketing are not working in isolation, and I do see way too many instances where people start off with this concept, oh, well, we'll run an ABM pilot, we'll cherry pick a few accounts, we'll see how it goes. And they're just not setting themselves up for success. So I think understand the business fundamentals, engage your leadership team and everybody that's client and revenue facing, and then think of the most appropriate approach. And if that is the end-to-end from account-based branding to buyer group marketing to deals to channel, great. If it's actually we're going to focus on account-based branding to new customers for the next 6 to 12 months, fine. If it's, well, I mean, how could you not talk about buyer groups? You've got to understand them. But I think you've got to, work out what your strategy is and how you're going to leverage ABM most intelligently for your business.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting about that sort of sales involvement and making sure that is aligned. We had a meeting today where we were talking to the marketing director, and we were saying, should it only be about results in the early stage? Or is it just about that the C-suite, the senior management, know that there's a strategy being deployed, that it actually is best practice? It's been signed off on, that this is the strategy, this is the timeline, because one of the things we always talk about is we get the best results in ABM if it's over a prolonged or a longer period of time. Sure. And you really start to see those economies of scale. So many C-suite executives, or the pressure on results and things like that, comes cascading down to sales and marketing. Do you think the tide is turning, Robert, in relation to the consideration that ABM should be considered as this long-term model, this ABM operating system should be deployed as a long-term model, knowing that you are driving towards success and best practice? Are we getting to that point, or is it still about results and people just want those results all the time?
Well, I think there's definitely a movement towards seeing ABM as a long-term strategic play and a long-term strategic commitment. The catch is, of course, most organizations are on quarterly revenue targets, particularly if they're public companies, and most salespeople are also tasked on quarterly revenue targets. Then you get into this conversation which is, okay, these are strategic accounts, either for growth or winning. The typical sales cycle for these companies is normally 12 to 18 months, but we'd like to see results from our ABM program within 3. How does that work? So I think you then have to say, well, if we are looking to drive pipeline within 3 to 6 months, what can we do within our ABM strategy that will complement the long-term strategic play? So in that sense, I've sometimes talked about bimodal, which is you're in 2 speeds at once. You've got your long-term strategic play to the accounts that you think are going to add the most value to the business. But in terms of short-term pipeline, there are things you can do more quickly. And almost inevitably, the strategic play tends to be a relatively small number of accounts where perhaps you're doing one-to-one or one-to-few ABM, and the shorter-term pipeline driving, if you like, is often more of a programmatic one-to-many play where you're obviously targeting more accounts. Mm-hmm. Now, are you going to land those within Q1? Probably not. But are you going to be able to show demonstrable revenue and pipeline opportunities that have been identified? Probably. So I think that concept of having 2 speeds or twin speeds is worth thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess, Francesca, from your point in channel, when vendors are putting MDF into partners, obviously MDF funding sometimes is given on the back end of results. So as you say, that immediacy is almost like that turbocharge. What should partners be taking out of the operating system, which is almost like that fast forward, but then underpinning that with sort of that progressive strategy? Do you think vendors are going to change their consideration on that?
I think it's not just one size fits all. When you look at MDF programs, there's different varyings of them. There are some that are very quarterly focused, which are, very much you must have 10 leads or you must have 10 people on a webinar or whatever, which are, pretty binary numbers and talk to this like fast forward. I think the trick there is knowing how your quarters are going to join up and how you can have a strategy around those. And I think there's a building effect that you can do on those, but you do absolutely also have those strategic plays, because as an ABM, if you're a vendor and you're investing in ABM and it's a lot more in terms of volume of cash or investment, we do see year or 2 yearly strategic plans as well coming out. So we are seeing a move in vendors definitely to taking a much more of a strategic approach, and the milestones are much more revenue based and leading indicator based. So I think there's definitely positive signs in that respect, which then make it suitable to the ABM operating system in that respect as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm picking up on the theme of MDF. I mean, I've worked in the channel for longer than I should ever admit. I mean, actually, probably more than 30 years.
You're lucky you got out.
Yeah. I mean, I did actually run marketing for a distributor at one point, if you can believe that. But MDF typically is something I think that's been used and abused. A distributor or a partner will earn lots of MDF if they're successful, and then they'll do what the hell they like with it. And in the days when I used to work in distribution, they used to put it on the bottom line half the time.
And that still can happen, absolutely.
That still happens. So I think
now, though.
the concept of partner-based ABM actually gives the vendor potentially a lot more control over how is this MDF being spent. And we would like to see it spent in the following areas. So we'd like to target this vertical market or these accounts, and we'd like to do it in a strategic way where we'll collaborate with you in terms of creating content or perhaps doing the research or coming up with our joint value proposition and messaging. And in that sense, I think it gives, in a sense, the partner ecosystem the opportunity to be more sophisticated, or at least the vendor to drive greater sophistication in the use of that MDF in an intelligent way.
Yeah, and I think it can be independent of the MDF. That is a funding mechanism that's out there, but
So I guess the operating system we talk about here, this utopian vision, could almost be like a bonding exercise more between the partners and the vendors to actually show a greater commitment, understanding. Do we think we're going to move to that model?
I definitely think so. I think it happens, definitely.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're helping people with it right now in that respect, but it is a strategic value play. You wouldn't do ABM with any partner like you wouldn't do ABM on any account, right? It's ones where you're engaged, you've got value, you can show value, you can sort of progress the relationship as well as getting into those much larger deals that you're targeting.
And another example, perhaps not quite so much partner ABM in terms of the collaboration, but something I've worked on recently is where I was working closely with the vendor and then one of their reseller partners, quite an important one, kind of picked up on the concept of ABM, asked them how they were doing it, and I ended up working with the partner then to basically coach them on how they should be doing ABM. And they were referencing back to the vendor, almost saying, how do they do this? How do they do that? Because they wanted to kind of replicate the approach.
Interesting.
So then it wasn't necessarily a collaborative, but it was an introduction. And then you have the quite a sophisticated reseller, but basically looking to emulate, to some degree at least, the ABM strategy of the vendor. And I think that's quite an interesting one too.
I think definitely on the resale partner move, there's a lot of movement into the vertical, the one to many and then onto a one to a few, because I've seen anyway traditionally that there hasn't been much personalization in terms of how they've gone to market. I'm really generalizing here, absolutely, but I'm seeing a lot more of a trend first to verticalization and then more to account, sort of one to one, one to few. That's the typical journey I'm seeing.
Yeah. And I think if you think historically, resellers have probably been much more interested in just taking a product and doing product marketing, push selling, and hoping for the best. If I think of this particular reseller I have in mind, then they've done exactly that. They've picked their top 3 or 4 verticals. They've picked 20 to 25 accounts in each, and now they're proactively going after them.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't stop their business as usual marketing, which might be more solution orientated or product orientated. But in the case of this particular ABM program, they are basically following what they sort of have picked up from the vendor, which is effectively a one-to-few program into a number of key verticals.
Yeah, and I think that's the trend. That's what I would agree. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
and we've been talking about that, putting relevant content in with people, looking at that was, a big passion of mine, buyer group marketing. How we nuancing that is we are verticalizing it, or we putting that to buyer group, but trying to speed up that deal velocity or engagement or even contribution to say, actually, we've got something in pipe now, but it's not going to land for 2 or 3 months, but you have that knowledge. So you get to that point quicker. So we could sit here for probably about another hour talking about this. Unfortunately, the sands of time are against us. Just as a wrap up now, commercial marketeer, Robert, I know obviously a lot of this has been driven because of that and that drive of that consideration of that becoming more of a role within corporate businesses. If you're taking that stance as either a commercial marketeer or a leading marketeer, what should be the first 2 or 3 things that you should be doing if you're going to say, right, I'm going to adopt this end-to-end strategy, this ABM operating system strategy, what should be 2 or 3 things that should immediately you got to get underway with to show progress and say, right, okay, I'm running with this, here we go?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one. So I would say understanding of the market, understanding of where the company makes its revenues, and therefore, of course, the sales agenda, understanding the customer, and then thinking about how you knit those things together. So that's about making the right decisions of where do we focus, the key verticals, the key accounts, how do we work really closely with sales and any other revenue functions in the business, and then how do we really understand the needs of the customer. And we haven't really got into that whole kind of execution piece today, but obviously all ABM is based on understanding the people you're talking to, whether that's the industry or the account or even within the buying group, the key personas. So any successful ABM program has to be based around research, insight, understanding of who you're talking to and why, and of course then what's going to resonate with them.
So the foundation of the strategy, once we've got that, we're off.
Yeah.
Good. Francesca, anything else to add to that? Do you, I mean, obviously you're going to support that. And
Of course.
yeah, in relation to people that you're going to talk about, do you think there's going to be an appetite in the channel or vendors for looking at this as more of a sort of a longer end-to-end strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's holistic. I think it applies to everyone in that respect. But to the earlier point, really, it's having those twin modes, aren't they? So you keep the business as usual, but you have that strategic growth.
Excellent. Well, look, I've really enjoyed that session. Robert, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
It sounds like we should have you back for another one when we start to talk about deployment and execution.
Well, as you know, I could talk about this stuff all day. So I hope I've at least made some sense in our short time together.
No, it's really good. And it's really good to get under the hood of it just a little bit more because, the presentation you gave at the ABM conference was really strong.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for having me.